when 80-year-old Marine Sergeant William Bill Hartman walks into Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom wearing his full dress blue uniform, complete with combat ribbons spanning 30 years of service. Everyone notices, but what they don't notice yet is the folder he's carrying. A folder containing proof that the city of Providence is about to commit an act so disgraceful, so disrespectful to American history, that Judge Caprio will personally intervene to stop it. Bill Hartman was arrested 5 days ago for standing in front of a bulldozer at a city construction site. The police report says he was belligerent, uncooperative, and mentally unstable. The city councilman who ordered his arrest told the media that Bill is a disturbed veteran who needs psychological help, not a platform. But when Judge Caprio asks Bill why he was willing to go to jail to stop that construction project, the answer he gives silences the entire courtroom. "Your Honor, they're building a parking lot on top of my brother's." 23 Union soldiers from the 11th Rhode Island Infantry are buried on that land, and Bill Hartman has spent 40 years making sure they're never forgotten. Subscribe now, because what happens next proves that some men will never stop fighting for their brothers, even 160 years after they fell. Before we dive into this incredible story, less than 5% of you watching are actually subscribed. If you believe in honoring our veterans, if you believe sacred ground should be protected, if you believe some things are more valuable than profit, hit that subscribe button right now. This story is going to spread everywhere, and you don't want to miss what Judge Caprio does when he uncovers the truth. Also, drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. Are you in California, Texas, London, Tokyo, Sydney? Because this story about respect, honor, and protecting those who can't protect themselves needs to reach every corner of the planet. It's a Tuesday morning in Providence Municipal Court, and the courtroom is already packed by 9 a.m. Judge Frank Caprio sits behind his bench reviewing case files, his reading glasses perched on his nose, completely unaware that he's about to witness something that will test everything he believes about justice, history, and the sacred duty we owe to those who served. The bailiff, Officer Marcus Williams, a 25-year court veteran who's seen thousands of cases, leans over to Judge Caprio and whispers something that makes the judge look up with immediate interest. "Your Honor, the next defendant is an 80-year-old Marine. He's wearing his dress blues. Full uniform. I've never seen anything like it in all my years here." Judge Caprio removes his glasses slowly, that familiar gesture that means he's shifting from legal formality into something more human, more personal. "Did he say why he's in uniform?" "No, sir. But he's been sitting out there for 2 hours, ramrod straight, hands folded in his lap, not moving, not speaking to anyone. He's got this old leather briefcase with him that looks like it's been through a war." Judge Caprio nods thoughtfully. "What's he charged with?" Officer Williams glances at the docket. "Disturbing the peace, trespassing on city property, and resisting arrest." "But, Your Honor, there's something else you should know. City Councilman Richard Brennan is here. He's the one who filed the complaint, and he's been telling everyone in the hallway that this defendant is mentally unstable and needs to be committed." Judge Caprio's jaw tightens slightly. Richard Brennan, a city councilman with a reputation for aggressive development projects and very little patience for anyone who stands in his way. This is already shaping up to be more complicated than a standard disturbing the peace case. "Call the case," Judge Caprio says quietly. "The State of Rhode Island versus William Joseph Hartman," Officer Williams announces, his voice carrying through the courtroom. Charges of disturbing the peace, criminal trespassing, and resisting arrest. The heavy courtroom doors open, and William Bill Hartman enters. The entire courtroom falls silent. Bill Hartman is 80 years old, but he walks with the bearing of a Marine who's never forgotten his training. His dress blue uniform is immaculate. Every ribbon is perfectly aligned. His shoes are polished to a mirror shine. His white cover sits precisely positioned on his head until he removes it respectfully as he enters the well of the court. His uniform tells a story that spans 3 decades of service. The ribbons include the Vietnam Service Medal with 4 campaign stars, the Navy Presidential Unit Citation, the Combat Action Ribbon, the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal with Combat V for Valor, and the Purple Heart. This is not a man who has lived a quiet life, but it's his eyes that capture Judge Caprio's attention. Clear, focused, filled with a determination that speaks of someone who has faced down far more intimidating things than a courtroom. Bill walks slowly to the defendant's table, carrying a worn leather briefcase that looks like it's been with him through every deployment. He sets it down carefully, stands at attention, and waits. Judge Caprio stands up from his bench, which he only does when he wants to show particular respect. "Sergeant Hartman, please be at ease. You may be seated." Bill sits down, back straight, hands folded, that briefcase within reach at all times. Before Judge Caprio can speak, a voice erupts from the gallery. "Your Honor, I need to address the court immediately." City Councilman Richard Brennan stands up from the third row. He's in his mid-50s, expensive suit, perfectly styled hair, the kind of politician who spent years cultivating an image of authority and importance. Judge Caprio's expression remains neutral, but those who know him can see the flash of irritation in his eyes. "Councilman Brennan, this is not a city council meeting. You'll have an opportunity to speak when called. Please sit down." Brennan doesn't sit. "Your Honor, with respect, this man is dangerous. He physically interfered with a city construction project. He stood in front of heavy equipment. He could have been killed, and he put workers at risk. The city has serious concerns about his mental stability." The words mental stability hang in the air like an accusation. Bill Hartman's expression doesn't change. He continues sitting perfectly still, but his hands grip each other slightly tighter. Judge Caprio's voice drops to that tone. Everyone who watches his cases knows means he's reached the limit of his patience. "Councilman Brennan, I will not warn you again. Sit down now, or I will have you removed from this courtroom." Brennan sits, but the damage is done. He's already planted the seed that Bill Hartman is mentally unstable, dangerous, a problem to be solved rather than a person to be heard. Judge Caprio turns his attention to Bill. "Sergeant Hartman, you're charged with disturbing the peace at a city construction site on Randall Street, criminal trespassing on city property, and resisting arrest when officers attempted to remove you. How do you plead?" Bill stands slowly, using the table to steady himself. When he speaks, his voice is strong despite his age. "Guilty, Your Honor. I did exactly what they say I did. I stood in front of that bulldozer, and I refused to move when the police ordered me to leave. I accept full responsibility for my actions." A murmur runs through the courtroom. Most defendants make excuses, deny responsibility, try to minimize their actions. Bill Hartman just admitted everything without hesitation. Judge Caprio sits back in his chair, studying Bill carefully. "Sergeant, before we proceed to sentencing, I'd like to understand why you did what you did. The police report says you arrived at the construction site at 6 a.m. before work began. You positioned yourself directly in front of the excavation equipment and refused to move for over 3 hours. Can you explain to this court what motivated such actions?" Bill takes a deep breath. This is the moment he's been waiting for. "Your Honor, may I approach the bench and show you something?" Judge Caprio nods. "Please." Bill picks up his leather briefcase with both hands, treating it with reverence, and walks slowly to stand directly before Judge Caprio's bench. He opens the briefcase carefully, and what he removes makes several people in the gallery lean forward to see. It's a map. But not just any map. It's a hand-drawn military survey map from 1863, yellowed with age, protected by a plastic sleeve, marked with careful notations in faded ink. "Your Honor," Bill says, his voice beginning to shake with emotion, "this is a Union Army burial map from the Civil War. It shows the location of 23 soldiers from the 11th Rhode Island Infantry who died in a field hospital in Providence in 1863. Most of them died from wounds received at the Battle of Gettysburg. They never made it home to their families. They were buried in a field on what is now Randall Street." He carefully unfolds the map, and Judge Caprio leans forward, his experienced eyes immediately recognizing the historical significance of what he's seeing. "These 23 men," Bill continues, pointing to marked locations on the map, "were buried with full military honors by their unit chaplain. But over time, the wooden markers rotted away. The field was forgotten. Buildings were constructed. The land changed hands dozens of times. And these soldiers, These American heroes who died defending the Union were lost to history. Judge Caprio's voice is gentle. Sergeant Hartman, how did you come to possess this map? Bill's eyes begin to glisten. My grandfather, Your Honor. He was also in the 11th Rhode Island Infantry. He served as a drummer boy during the war. He was at Gettysburg. He marched with Sherman. And when the war ended, he came home to Providence and made it his life's mission to remember his brothers who didn't make it home. This map was his. He passed it to my father. My father passed it to me, and I have spent the last 40 years making sure these men are never forgotten. From the gallery, Councilman Brennan's voice cuts through the emotion. Your Honor, this is exactly what I'm talking about. This man is living in a fantasy world. That map is probably a fake. There are no graves on that property. The city has owned that land for 60 years. We've had surveys done. There's nothing there. Bill turns slowly to face Brennan, and when he speaks, his voice carries the authority of 3 decades in the Marine Corps. You didn't look deep enough, Councilman. You didn't look because you didn't care. You wanted that land sold to your developer friends, and you didn't want anything to get in the way of profit. Brennan's face flushes red. How dare you accuse me of? That's enough. Judge Caprio's voice cracks like a whip. Both of you, stop. Right now. The courtroom falls silent. Judge Caprio looks at Bill. Sergeant, you said you've been protecting this land for 40 years. What exactly does that mean? Bill reaches back into his briefcase and pulls out a thick stack of documents. Your Honor, I have letters to the city dating back to 1984, requesting that the Randall Street property be surveyed for historical significance. I have responses from 4 different city administrations acknowledging my concerns but taking no action. I have photographs I've taken every year showing the land before it became a vacant lot. I have historical records from the Rhode Island Historical Society confirming that the 11th Rhode Island Infantry had a field hospital in that exact location. And I have testimony from a ground-penetrating radar specialist who volunteered to survey the site and confirmed the presence of 23 anomalies consistent with burial sites. The courtroom erupts in whispers. Judge Caprio raises his hand for silence. Councilman Brennan, Judge Caprio says, his voice cold, were you aware of any of this documentation when the city voted to sell the Randall Street property? Brennan stands, his confidence wavering slightly. Your Honor, the city planning department handles these matters. I'm sure if there were legitimate historical concerns, they would have been addressed through proper channels. Bill turns to face him fully. I followed your proper channels for 40 years, Councilman. I wrote letters. I attended meetings. I submitted evidence. And I was ignored every single time because preserving the graves of 23 forgotten soldiers doesn't generate tax revenue. And then Bill says something that makes everyone in the courtroom hold their breath. So last week, when I saw the construction crews arriving to begin excavation, I put on my uniform, I took my post, and I decided that if those 23 men couldn't defend themselves, then I would defend them, even if it meant going to jail, even if it meant people like you calling me crazy. Because that's what Marines do, Councilman. We never leave our brothers behind. The courtroom explodes, not with noise, but with emotion. Several people are openly crying. A man in a Navy veteran's cap stands up and salutes Bill. A woman in the back row whispers, "Thank you," so loudly it echoes. Judge Caprio sits perfectly still, his hands pressed together in front of his face, absorbing everything he's just heard. When he finally speaks, his voice carries the weight of his 38 years on the bench. Sergeant Hartman, I need to see all of your documentation. Every letter, every photograph, every piece of evidence you've collected over 40 years. I want it all on my desk within 1 hour. He turns to Councilman Brennan. Councilman, I'm ordering the city to immediately halt all construction on the Randall Street property until this court has thoroughly reviewed Sergeant Hartman's evidence. Furthermore, I'm ordering the city to provide me with all documentation related to the sale of that property, including any environmental or historical impact studies that were conducted. Brennan's face goes pale. Your Honor, the city has already entered into a contract with the developer. There are significant financial penalties if... I don't care about financial penalties. Judge Caprio's voice rises, and everyone in the courtroom sits up straighter. If there are American soldiers buried on that property, if there are men who died defending this country lying forgotten beneath a vacant lot, then no contract, no development deal, no financial consideration matters more than giving them the honor and respect they deserve. But guys, before I show you what Judge Caprio does next, I need you to do something. In the comments below, tell me if you've ever fought for something everyone told you to give up on. Have you ever stood alone defending what you believed was right? Share your story, because Bill Hartman's courage represents all of us who refuse to quit when everyone says we should. Judge Caprio stands up from his bench. This court is in recess for 2 hours. Sergeant Hartman, Officer Williams will escort you to my chambers where we will review your evidence in detail. Councilman Brennan, you're required to remain in this building. I may have questions for you. As the courtroom begins to empty, Judge Caprio does something that stuns everyone present. He walks down from his bench, approaches Bill Hartman, and extends his hand. Sergeant, Judge Caprio says quietly, thank you for your service, and thank you for not giving up on those 23 men. Bill shakes his hand, tears now flowing freely down his weathered face. Your Honor, I couldn't live with myself if I let them be forgotten. 2 hours later, Judge Caprio reconvenes court with an expression that makes everyone in the gallery sit forward in anticipation. He spent 120 minutes reviewing 40 years of documentation, photographs, historical records, and ground-penetrating radar reports. I've reviewed Sergeant Hartman's evidence, Judge Caprio announces, and I can say without hesitation that this is the most thorough, well-documented, and historically significant case I've encountered in my entire career. This man has devoted 4 decades of his life to honoring fallen soldiers who have no one else to speak for them. He picks up one of the documents, the ground-penetrating radar survey conducted by Dr. Sarah Chen from Brown University's Department of Archaeology confirms the presence of 23 burial site-consistent anomalies in the exact locations marked on the 1863 map. The Rhode Island Historical Society has provided documentation confirming that the 11th Rhode Island Infantry maintained a field hospital on Randall Street from July through November 1863. And Sergeant Hartman has letters from the families of 3 of the buried soldiers, families he personally tracked down over the years, confirming their ancestors never returned home from the war. Judge Caprio looks directly at Councilman Brennan. Councilman, the City Planning Department was required to conduct a historical impact study before approving this sale. Was that study completed? Brennan shifts uncomfortably. I believe so, Your Honor, but I'd have to check with... It wasn't. Judge Caprio's voice cuts through the excuse. I called the Rhode Island Historical Preservation Commission during the recess. They have no record of receiving any request for review of the Randall Street property. That means the city violated state law by approving the sale of potentially historic land without proper authorization. The courtroom gasps. Brennan's face drains of all color. Judge Caprio continues, and his voice takes on a tone of absolute moral authority. But beyond the legal violations, beyond the procedural failures, there's something far more important at stake here. We're talking about 23 American soldiers, 23 men who left their homes, their families, their futures to fight in the most devastating war in our nation's history. 23 men who died far from home and were buried by their brothers in arms with whatever dignity could be provided in the midst of war. Those men deserve better than to be paved over for a parking lot. He looks at Bill Hartman. Sergeant, you pleaded guilty to the charges against you. You admitted to standing in front of that bulldozer and refusing to move. You accepted full responsibility for your actions. That kind of integrity is rare in this courtroom. Bill stands at attention. I did what needed to be done, Your Honor. Judge Caprio nods slowly. Yes, you did, and now I'm going to do what needs to be done. Councilman Brennan jumps to his feet. Your Honor, the city will appeal this order. You can't just... Sit down, Councilman. Judge Caprio's voice is ice cold. I'm not finished with you yet. Brennan sits, and for the first time since this case began, he looks genuinely frightened. Councilman Brennan, you came into this courtroom and publicly stated that Sergeant Hartman is mentally unstable. You suggested he's dangerous. You attempted to discredit a decorated combat veteran who has spent 40 years fighting for something you couldn't be bothered to investigate. That kind of disrespect will not stand in my courtroom. Judge Caprio picks up another document. I'm referring this matter to the Rhode Island Attorney General's office for investigation of potential violations of state historic preservation laws. I'm also recommending that the Providence City Council Ethics Committee review your conduct in this matter, specifically whether you failed to properly disclose relationships with developers who stood to benefit from the Randall Street sale. Brennan's lawyer, who's been sitting quietly until now, stands up quickly. Your Honor, Councilman Brennan has fully complied with all ethics requirements. That remains to be seen, Judge Caprio interrupts. And I suggest your client remain silent for the remainder of these proceedings unless he wants to face contempt charges. The judge turns back to Bill Hartman, and his entire demeanor softens. Sergeant, I want to thank you personally for what you've done, not just for those 23 soldiers, but for all of us. You've reminded this community that some things matter more than money, more than development, more than progress. You've reminded us that we have a sacred duty to honor those who sacrificed everything for our freedom. Bill's voice cracks when he responds. Your Honor, I'm just doing what any Marine would do. We take care of our brothers, all of them, no matter how long it's been. Judge Caprio nods, and when he speaks again, there are tears in his eyes. Sergeant Hartman, if that archaeological survey confirms what we all know it will confirm, that there are 23 Union soldiers buried on that land, I will personally ensure that they receive a proper military memorial. I will work with the National Park Service, the Department of Veterans Affairs, and every organization necessary to make sure those men are never forgotten again. And I will make sure your name is on that memorial, because without you, they would have been lost forever. The courtroom erupts in thunderous applause. People are standing, crying, cheering. Bill Hartman, the 80-year-old Marine who everyone said was crazy, who everyone dismissed as a senile old man living in the past, stands at attention with tears streaming down his face. Judge Caprio steps down from his bench one final time and walks over to Bill. In a moment that becomes legendary in Providence legal history, Judge Frank Caprio, one of the most respected judges in America, salutes William Joseph Hartman, Marine Sergeant, guardian of the forgotten. Bill returns the salute with trembling hands. Semper Fi, Sergeant, Judge Caprio says quietly. Semper Fi, Your Honor, Bill responds. The archaeological survey took 3 weeks to complete. Dr. Sarah Chen and her team from Brown University worked carefully, using ground-penetrating radar, soil sampling, and historical documentation to map the site. On a cold December morning, Dr. Chen presented her findings to Judge Caprio, Sergeant Hartman, and a packed courtroom. We have confirmed the presence of 23 burial sites, Dr. Chen announced. The remains are located exactly where Sergeant Hartman's 1863 map indicated they would be. Based on artifacts recovered during our investigation, including uniform buttons, belt buckles, and personal effects, we can confirm these are Union Army soldiers from the Civil War era, consistent with the 11th Rhode Island Infantry. The courtroom fell silent as the magnitude of Bill's 40-year quest sank in. He was right. He had been right all along. Dr. Chen continued. Furthermore, we were able to recover several items that will help us identify specific individuals. One soldier was buried with a locket containing a photograph and the name Sarah engraved on the back. Another had a pocket watch with initials JMC engraved on the case. These items, combined with military records, should allow us to identify at least some of these men and potentially locate their descendants. Bill Hartman, sitting in the front row, wept openly. 40 years. 40 years of letters ignored, meetings dismissed, accusations of mental instability, and now, finally, vindication. Judge Caprio ordered the immediate creation of a memorial park on the Randall Street site. The City Council, facing a public relations disaster and potential legal consequences, voted unanimously to approve the plan. 6 months later, on Memorial Day, the Hartman Memorial Park was dedicated. The park features 23 individual markers, each bearing the name of a fallen soldier from the 11th Rhode Island Infantry. Thanks to Dr. Chen's work and Bill's decades of research, 19 of the 23 soldiers were identified by name. At the dedication ceremony, attended by over 3,000 people, including the governor of Rhode Island, members of Congress, and military representatives from across the country, Bill Hartman stood in his dress blues and read the names of all 23 men: Private First Class James Michael Collins, Private Thomas Andrew Riley, Corporal Daniel Joseph Murphy. As each name was read, a Marine in dress uniform placed an American flag at the corresponding marker. When Bill finished reading the final name, the crowd stood in absolute silence. Then, spontaneously, every veteran in attendance saluted. Then, everyone else joined them, hands over hearts, honoring men who had been forgotten for 160 years, but were forgotten no more. Judge Frank Caprio spoke at the ceremony, and his words captured everything this case represented. William Hartman taught us that one person, standing alone, can change the world. He taught us that honor is not convenient, that duty does not expire, and that some battles are worth fighting, even when everyone tells you to give up. These 23 soldiers died far from home, but they are home now. They are remembered, they are honored, and they will never be forgotten again, because one Marine refused to leave his brothers behind. The Providence City Council issued a formal apology to Bill Hartman. Councilman Richard Brennan resigned under pressure after ethics investigations revealed he had failed to disclose financial relationships with the development company that was supposed to build on the Randall Street property. Bill Hartman became a local hero and eventually a national symbol of dedication to remembering the fallen. He was invited to speak at military academies, veterans organizations, and historical societies across the country. But the moment Bill treasured most came 3 weeks after the memorial dedication, when a 78-year-old woman named Margaret Collins traveled from Ohio to Providence to visit the grave of Private First Class James Michael Collins. "He was my great-great-grandfather," she told Bill through tears. "My family always knew he died in the war, but we never knew where he was buried. For 160 years, we didn't know. And now, because of you, I can finally tell him thank you. I can finally bring my grandchildren here and show them where their ancestor rests." Bill held her hand as they stood before the marker together. "He was a brave man, ma'am. He served with honor, and now his family knows where to find him." That moment, repeated dozens of times as descendants of other buried soldiers made pilgrimages to the memorial, represented everything Bill had fought for: connection, remembrance, honor. Judge Frank Caprio attended many of those family reunions at the memorial. He watched as Bill personally met with each family, shared what historical records revealed about their ancestors, and ensured that every soldier's story was told with dignity and respect. "This is why I became a judge," Caprio told a reporter who was covering the story. "Not to enforce laws, but to ensure that justice is served. And sometimes justice means standing with one man against an entire system that's forgotten what truly matters." 3 years after the memorial's dedication, Bill Hartman passed away peacefully at the age of 83. His funeral was attended by thousands, including active duty Marines, veterans from every branch of service, and descendants of the 23 soldiers he had spent his life protecting. He was buried with full military honors at the Memorial Park, his grave placed at the center of the 23 soldiers he had refused to abandon. His headstone reads, "William Joseph Hartman, Sergeant, United States Marine Corps, 1940-2023, Guardian of the Fallen Semper Fidelis." At his funeral, Judge Frank Caprio delivered the eulogy. Bill Hartman never asked for recognition. He never asked for thanks. He simply did what he believed was right every single day for 40 years. He showed us that one person with courage and conviction can stand against indifference, bureaucracy, and institutional failure. He proved that honor is not old-fashioned, that duty never expires, and that some debts can never be repaid, only remembered. Today, the Hartman Memorial Park is one of the most visited historic sites in Rhode Island. School groups come to learn about the Civil War and the 11th Rhode Island Infantry. Veterans come to pay their respects to forgotten brothers in arms. Families come to teach their children that every life matters, every sacrifice deserves recognition, and one person truly can make a difference. And every Memorial Day, at precisely 10 a.m., Marines in dress uniforms stand at each of the 23 graves in Bill Hartman's grave, rendering honors to men who might have been forgotten forever, if not for one 80-year-old veteran who refused to let them go. If this story moved you, if Bill Hartman's courage inspired you, if Judge Caprio's pursuit of real justice restored your faith, then subscribe to this channel right now. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that standing up for what's right is always worth it, no matter the cost. Like this video if you believe our veterans, past and present, deserve our eternal gratitude and respect. And remember Bill Hartman's words, Marines never leave their brothers behind. Not in war. Not in peace. Not ever. Comment below and tell me, who is your hero? Who in your life has shown the kind of courage and dedication that Bill Hartman showed? Because their stories deserve to be told, too. This is the legacy of Judge Frank Caprio. This is the courage of William Joseph Hartman. This is what happens when one person refuses to give up on what matters most. Justice served, honor restored, brothers remembered.